In December, there are 200 holidays and observances. And while few of us have the interest, time, or energy to celebrate them all, many of us will celebrate at least a few. In that vein, we'll be replaying two of our most popular episodes, and we'll return with a new conversation on January 6th, 2024. Episode 4, first released in July 2022, focuses on the psychosocial hazard we in the United States know the most about. This conversation was with the co-founder of the Workplace Bullying Institute, Dr. Gary Namie, who, along with his co-founder and wife, Dr. Ruth Namie, have studied bullying, mobbing, and other status-blind abusive conduct in the workplace for over 25 years. Remember, if you have a lived experience, research, or expertise in psychological health and safety, occupational health and safety, human resource management, or workplace mental health that you'd like to share, please reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to david@id2-solutions.com. Previous episodes of the podcast can be found at psychealthandsafetyusa.com or viewed on the Flourish DX YouTube page. Please like, subscribe, and share episodes with your colleagues, friends, and family. Until next time, to you and yours, we wish you a healthy, safe holiday season and a spectacular new year. We can't wait to share what's up next on the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each episode, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk Psych Health and Safety.
Well, welcome to this week's Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. I am so honored today to have one of the, what we call in our community, the OGs of the fight to rid the workplace from abusive behavior and bullying, Dr. Gary Namie. He's a psychologist, or he's a social psychologist, an academic, a researcher. He's been consulting for years. Had the privilege of meeting him some years ago, and I am honored to be an affiliate of the Workplace Bullying Institute. The man, the myth, the legend is here, and we're going to get right into it. And again, the first question is, who is Dr. Gary Namie? So tell us, Doc, who are you?
No, the first question is, what the heck's an OG? Original guy.
Oh, yeah. Now, old guy, original guy, it's a term of endearment.
Old guy?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I knew you when you were still pre-doc. Actually, congratulations, David, on getting your doctorate.
Yes, sir.
In fairly swift time. There are so many people that say they're going to do it, and they fall short. So good on you for doing that.
Thank you.
It was David who introduced me to the firefighting world, and everything has been positive ever since. In fact, the fire chiefs have done some remarkable work on workplace bullying. So, who am I?
Yes.
I'm Dr. Ruth's husband. She's the reason for the season. My wife, Dr. Ruth Namie, was a clinical psychologist who was bullied in a psychiatry clinic back in 93, 94, I think. And she got pushed out of her job, constructively discharged. And we didn't know what in the world had happened. And from that experience grew what is now 25 years old, the workplace. This year, this is our 25th anniversary of Workplace Bullying Institute. And as David said, we did research, but you know what we did in the very beginning? We listened to thousands and thousands of bullied people on the phone, telling their messy stories in disorganized manner, because nobody's linear.
Right.
And when it's so emotional, it's emotional abuse. So one's emotionality can be forgiven. It's a natural part of it. And so over the years, we've lived through the trauma of those tens of thousands of people, but then we started doing national surveys, worked a lot with unions and some early adopting employers, and we can talk about that. But I see you're part of a network now with this podcast, David, that's quite international. What were some of the countries that are involved, you say?
Yeah, well, so the folks over at Flourish DX who sponsor this podcast, to be quite honest, they're based in Australia, but there is a family of podcasts out there. There's one in Singapore, there's one in the UK, one in Canada, obviously the one in Australia, and now this one here in the US. So honored to be a part of the big family.
We are, yes, chronologically, you're added last.
Yeah.
But we, America, the US, lagged so far behind every one of those countries. Not sure about Singapore, but certainly Australia was doing work and workplace bullying in the early 90s. The group that started there, Beyond Bullying Association was their name. 4 people, just 4 individuals, a couple mental health folks and a management professor. And they worked on laws. First, they worked on helping people and educating the public, just like we've done. But they've been more effective. They've been able to get laws in both their workers' comp system and statutory laws. Australia has one of the few criminal laws against workplace bullying, where a poor 19-year-old gal named, what was her name? Braddock. I'm stumbling and I don't want to mess up her name, but the law is named after her. She was a 19-year-old who took her life. She was working in a small bistro, for crying out loud, and her boyfriend was among the tormentors. And cafe owner said, "Do you want me to tell your parents? Maybe we can help you." She was too ashamed, and she took her life. And they named the law after her. They criminalized it in the state of Victoria. Now, in Canada, every province has now addressed some form of workplace bullying, and they've built it, I think, appropriately. Let me back up. The Canadian history is first in the province of Quebec, where it was an employment law code. And it was rather messy. And what it did is I disagree with the fact that it forced complainants into doing mediation. And we know mediation is not appropriate for workplace violence, of which bullying is a form, albeit non-physical, sublethal form. Okay, but Quebec led the charge, and that was 1990. No, wrong country. 1994 was Sweden. That was the very first in the whole dang world.
Okay.
It was in 2003 that they passed, and in 2004 enacted the Quebec law. And then what the provinces all did in one form or another was pretty fantastic. They recognized how much, and it's part of our definition of bullying, how much of it is health harming as a consequence, right?
Right.
Okay. So they positioned it not in employment law by title, statutory law. They put it under the OHS regulations, Occupational Health and Safety, which, by the way, the entire world uses OHS.
Yes.
US uses OSH. Okay, yes. We're crazy. We just don't want to go along with the rest of the world. That's right. We're American. So the point is, they have now codified in the OHS regulations in nearly every province except BC, British Columbia, where you can complain about what they call grounds-based discrimination. What we know is discriminatory misconduct under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act.
Right?
Okay. Now that can be a health thing, But then what they've done beautifully is added to that discriminatory potential. How about if the bullying is not about discrimination? It's not the hatred is not based on the animus, as they say legally. It's not based on membership in a protected status group by the person making the complaint, but just garden variety cruelty and hatred, aka bullying. Okay. Well, you can make a occupational health violation complaint. And I think that's so smart. So that's how they put bullying in the Canadian law. It's pretty cool. In British Columbia, they actually added it to an eligible category for workers' comp claims.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Again, but that's health related.
That's
and it's
exactly
so
right.
perfect that it needs to be in a health category.
Yes.
And UK, of course, has had used their anti-harassment laws longstanding. The UK is the birthplace of the term workplace bullying.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, mobbing was the original Scandinavian term, and this British woman was a BBC radio reporter, later author, coined the phrase workplace bullying. She grew it up from the playground.
Sure.
So those who have come before us, Australia, and UK and Canada, they've laid the groundwork. They've shown what it could be done. Have they eradicated it? No,
of course not.
Human nature is not going to allow it to be totally eradicated. But at least they don't stick their head in the sand like the US.
So Doctor, for those who might be tuning in, who because you made that interesting distinction about how the word mobbing was where it started, and there's workplace bullying, and some people, when you say bullying, they think about kids. Talk a little bit about these definitions and what's the difference between bullying and mobbing, and for those who might not be aware.
You're absolutely right about a lot of people's minds, when you say bullying, go right to kids. And so they say it's child behavior. Well, it's childlike, but it's anything but. Mobbing was the original term coined in Sweden because a decade in the mid 1980s, a decade prior in Norway, Dan Olvius had worked on the phenomenon of school bullying, of children bullying. So the researcher and the advocate named Heinz Lehmann, who was working in Sweden that decade later, said, okay, bullying's for kids. And he didn't want to step on the toes of that movement. And he used the term mobbing for adults. And that, of course, became a false distinction. But the other distinction between mobbing and bullying originally, and mobbing aficionados to this day will tell you that they see them as distinct, although the researchers no longer agree. Mobbing was always seen as situations where there's more than one one perpetrator, more than one bully, more than one assailant, more than one person. But the truth is, this is how this works, David. Bullying is never one-on-one. Originally, it is birthed by someone who cannot stand another person, whether it be a peer, a superior, because bullying goes up the ladder too, or primarily down to someone subordinate to them in the organization. It's birthed by that person for reasons that they lack insight into understanding why they did what they did, mostly. But we know it's based mostly on envy and jealousy. So though it begins one-on-one, that one perpetrator very quickly assembles a whole team of supporters behind him or her. And yes, 30% of the time it's a she. So let's not let women off the hook totally. And in fact, women are incredibly abusive toward other women. So the point is, one-on-one, expanding to, let's turn to coworkers against that person. And then after months have passed and the targeted person, we call them targets, not victims. Once the targeted person has decided at that point to make a complaint to the organization, unfortunately, they go the wrong place and make complaints, thinking the organization will be supportive, but in reality, the organization joins the bully, especially if the bully or the perpetrator is a manager, as part of a management support ethos that basically said, we're behind you.
Right.
They back the wrong person.
Yes.
They back the cruel person, and then they abandon and discount and betray and defame and gaslight the targeted person till usually that person loses their job. So the mobbing idea, it's an artificial distinction, truth be told. And now the dominant researchers in the whole world come out of Norway, and they use the term bullying. They don't use mobbing.
Okay. All right. So obviously the title of this podcast is Psych Health and Safety. So this term psychological health and safety, and there's a lot of discussion in this, the community I've now been joining, and in my research as well, there's this discussion about psychological safety, the Edmondson concept that talks about being able to bring your whole self to the environment and such. And my research was more around psychosocial hazard mitigation, because if you have this really wonderful environment and folks are feeling really good, and you don't pay attention to these psychosocial hazards that are in the environment everywhere, you cannot eliminate them. You just can't. But you have to be able to identify them and mitigate them. If you don't do that part, what started off as healthy will become unhealthy. So talk a little bit about the connection between psychological health and safety in general, mental health, sometimes folks refer to it, and how bullying fits. I mean, because some might say that they're separate concepts. Actually, I think they're connected. So what say you?
Wow. There's a small, short book in what you just said.
Okay.
First of all, I always cite Edmondson's research because that was adopted by Google when they did their internal research, trying to designate which teams were the most effective, the most creative, the most innovative. And they found that the barrier to creativity within groups, and Edmondson uses the concept of psychological safety where she's talking about the group as the unit, the work team as the unit. The barrier is feeling that you cannot be safe to speak up without ridicule, retaliation, and debasement. And so the whole thing is psychological safety is the freedom to speak up and the freedom from ridicule and torment. And for us, harassment, AKA bullying. Mm-hmm. But then you dipped your little toe in there with your dissertation into the psychosocial. Now that's a newer concept. Edmondson's original paper is 1999.
Yes. Google,
that was back in, I don't know, maybe 2015 or earlier. The years fly by. My good friend always said, as we get older, that's because everyone else is trying to push us out quicker, so it's expedited. So I don't know exactly when that happened, but I do remember it was front page New York Times, where the lay world heard about this research that Google had incorporated into their own team assessments. So that was really, really cool to me. But then a little later, and coming out of Tasmania and Australia and all, comes psychosocial, the psychosocial work environment, which is more encompassing than just psychological safety. In my training, which you have taken, but is now constantly updated, Workplace Bullying University, go online to see about registration details.
Absolutely.
Next class is not till the fall. In fact, I'm starting the weekend tomorrow.
Okay.
The date of this taping, tomorrow's the next university. Here's the point. I think we need, for a healthy workplace, those two safeties. Yes, the psychological, but we need the psychosocial safety climate to ensure that that employers have incorporated into the intangible work conditions and the delegations of authority and the way communications are handled. Please add to that the quality of safe social relationships.
Yes.
And so there's where we get the psychosocial. Now,
Yes.
I say, and this is my version of a healthy workplace, you need them both. You need the psychological safety.
You do.
The psychosocial safety is the freedom from emotional injury.
Absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
health harm of what, well, it's right in our definition. Workplace
Absolutely.
bullying is repeated, health harming mistreatment of an employee by one or more employees. It's abusive conduct that takes the form of either verbal abuse, threats, intimidation, humiliation, or tactically work sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
So we need freedom from all of that noise.
That's right.
That
That's right.
meddling has absolutely nothing to do with, quote, productivity.
That's
Or
correct.
getting work done. It undermines it.
That's right.
And the quicker employers understand that, the quicker they should jump on the psychosocial safety bandwagon, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as I talk about it purely as a occupational safety and health professional, there's these 6 hazards that we're exposed to in the workplace: biological, chemical, ergonomic, safety, and physical. And in the United States, we forget about that 6th one. We forget about.
That's right. Our list is short.
Our list is short. And then on top of that, if we were to address that one, we get less of the others, because often these physical, so a person is driving down the road and runs into the back of the person in front of them, it's because they were stressed out by their boss who gave them way too much work, unrealistic expectations, something happened at home, they're sick, whatever it is, mentally they're not into it. And then eventually it shows up physically. So I don't think we pay enough attention to how people feel. It's
That's
important
an
how people
artificial
feel.
distinction, isn't it?
Absolutely. It
The
totally is.
psychological health and the physical health. The point is, all of the mistreatment that has been the center of my life, dwelling on the dark side of work all these years, is all about stress-related diseases. And they are, yes, they are biological.
Yes.
But the brain is biological. The stressed brain is reacting chemically.
Yes.
As we know to,
Yes.
now we know. We didn't know all this when I was a professor. I had two careers. I was an academic for 21 years. Then this happened to my wife, and this has been my second career, and I don't need a third. But the point is, I'm a recovering academic. Hello, my name's Gary, one day at a time, a little more practical.
Right.
But the point is that is an artificial distinction. It is all biological.
Yes.
What was the phrase Peter Schnall used in one of his books? And how does the next something external in the work environment, some negative condition, get translated to hardening of the arteries, arteriosclerosis?
Yes.
And they called it a psychophysiological transformation. It is an amazing thing. Right. But it's all run through the perceptions, and the perceptions are all routed through your brain.
Well, absolutely.
And therefore, we never knew about the brain's role in stress until the explosion of the technologies to study the brain, functional MRI, and then other techniques, PET scans and other stuff. But the point is, now we've got these things so pinpointed, the reactions in the brain, we can see how the stressed brain operates. That property of atrophy, of reduced cortical volume, or it doesn't have to be the cortex. Primarily, you want to screw somebody up when you're hounding them, not just meddling, when you're tormenting them, harassing them on a chronic basis. That's a key. Right. Chronicity is key. Right. And we're not talking about a single emotional explosion. We're talking about steady drumbeat mistreatment. Right. Degradation of another human being, showing utter contempt for that other human being. Right. Let alone you and I talk about the need to care for one another. Sure. That's only what good people talk about. Right. The truly evil ones among us don't even consider that. It's how may I torment and control someone else on a daily basis. When you subject a person to that the stress hormone, just take one example, the stress hormone cortisol, which is, we've known how it affects organs as it courses through the veins during times of fight or flight, initial stress arousal. but we didn't know what it did to the brain. Now we do.
Wow.
If you take this routine pounding, your memory centers, hippocampus, amygdala, and frontal cortex are going to be atrophied. You're actually going to lose volume in those regions of the brain. And when you lose volume, when it shrinks, you lose, and it does it by dendrite shortening. It doesn't kill off all the cells. It primarily shortens the dendrites. Hold on to that idea. There are two ends to the neuronal cell, the tree-like dendrites. Okay, so they get shortened. The volume is reduced. Here's the key. The behavior changes. The brain's functionality changes. You can't lay down new memories. Furthermore, you can't retrieve the old ones. Well, what passes for competence and intelligence? It's sound memory. It's the ability to recall everything in the past. You're the go-to expert in your department for years and years. But now that you've got this new boss who's hounding you and all that, you suddenly can't perform. Right. You have not lost the skill. You now are having a biological restructuring of your brain because of another human being. That's psychosocial work environment messing with your biology. And yet there's no appearance of it. So people say, well, you look normal, but you're not functioning normally.
Right.
Plus, even I just got new stuff in the university. Your own self-perception is distorted. You can't even know, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So here's the point. That dendrite shortening is the key to recovery. If you get healthy again, if you are made safe again, if your psychosocial work environment is addressed by an intelligent employer who cares for the health of employees rather than backing up an abusive manager or one of your peers or an abusive person, period. If they get with that program and put employee health at the top, make that a priority, then what happens is you will get healthy again, because the second property of the brain is plasticity. Okay. And that shrinkage will, it's like you've dehydrated a seed and now you water it and it is swollen again. But the point is that region of the brain becomes fully functional again. Got to turn off the stressors.
Wow.
Stressors are those aspects of the psychosocial work environment.
So what we hear so much in the US, and actually sounds like around the world, is, well, it's the person. So we've got to send them to yoga, and we're going to put some fruit bowls out, and we'll send the AP, and we're going to do all these things, and
wellness program.
Yeah, all the wellness programs. But what doesn't get addressed is the environment itself. So which is where the problem is. The problem's not the person. The problem's the environment we put the person in. Did you go out and hire someone who you thought was terrible, who you thought couldn't perform, who you thought couldn't do the job? Absolutely not. You hired the best people, the most qualified, the highest on the list. So what happens 6 months, a year, 3 years down the road when they all of a sudden can't function, and they've been telling you the entire time it's the environment, the entire time?
Sometimes you hire good actors. And what happens is when the work environment provides an opportunity, when the opportunity to aggress against other people presents itself, certain types of toxic individuals aren't toxic. Certain types of people will perceive that opportunity as a chance to gain advantage over others, and they will exploit others. People we call targets would never see that. Right. They're blind to that. They're naive to that because they lack what we call political intelligence. You know what? The hell with political intelligence. We haven't even mastered emotional intelligence and caring for one another enough. Let's please not move on, as one Harvard Business Review paper said. Forget emotional intelligence. Let's go with political. So to deal with bullies, we all have to learn to be bullies. No. Right. Those kind souls, those kind, tender souls, I want to preserve. Right. I don't want them to have to be under attack. Why should they have to change? And of course, that's their sense of injustice themselves as they perceive it. Why should I have to change? All right. Why do we focus so much on individuals? First, and then let me give you a nationalistic explanation, that America loves individualism. We revere individualism. We focus on the cowboy mentality, and that person will be that also means we're willing to elevate authoritarians to godlike status and follow them into the pit, which scares the heck out of me. But there is that notion that individualism, as opposed to European collectivism, it's not as stark a contrast as it used to be, because quite frankly, authoritarianism is creeping all over the world, as we know. And so don't separate societal trends from the workplace. The workplaces are embedded in society.
They are.
But nevertheless, American firms still, look at what we do to CEO salaries, the skyrocket, the disproportionate pay they receive by virtue of being on the top of an org chart. We speak of people being higher and lower, of being superior and inferior. The language of org chart thinking in hierarchical arrangements, as Sapolsky says, the stress guru, itself is stressful to organize people into tiers. Okay, so but that's how we think we do it. But you know what? Every corporation, every organization, every employer, every company is human made.
Right.
It's not biological design.
Right.
You could change that.
Right.
And if you find that design by itself is hurting people, okay. The second explanation has nothing to do with Americanism, and it's more the human condition. Quick social psychological tip. People tend to render work environments invisible because we don't see them causing people's actions. Rather, we focus on individuals. We over-attribute. This is called the fundamental attribution error. Funny title for a very simple concept. If I'm looking at you, I'm holding you accountable for your fate. If you're bullied, there must have been something wrong with you. You're flawed. If you're in charge, then you must have some magic power that put you in charge, and you have tremendous qualities and characteristics. So it's two sides of the same cut. But we humans now, not just Americans, humans tend to focus on when we perceive people, they are dominant in our field of perception. And so when we perceive people, guess what gets ignored? All the invisible factors in the work environment. We don't see how the person was supervised over the last 6 months.
Right.
We don't see how their work hours were changed, how it deprives them of time at home with family. Certainly, we can bring in family. We don't see stressors from the family. We don't see the workplace culture's imposition of its way on the individual's value system. We don't see any of that. All we do is, I'm looking at you, Joe, and all I can figure out is it must be something about you, either good or bad. I'm willing to give you that power. Now, that means when it's bad fate, I'm assigning you blame for your own fate.
Right.
But you, as a targeted person, never once woke up on a workday and said, you know what? Today I need a good heavy dose of humiliation. I'm going to ask for it, because that's going to make me a better person. Hogwash. Hogwash.
Wow.
Until we start focusing on the invisible. That's the key for investigators. What makes a sham investigation into complaint shameful and shameful, I guess, if that's a word, is they just focus on the players. They go to the alleged perpetrator. Did you do it? Nope. What's wrong with you? Now, what is it about you that made him or her want to attack you? There must be something. Let's dig deeper. Furthermore, that's dangerous if you do it as a business, because now you're never going to draw the conclusion where you see pattern and practice of repeat offenders. A healthy workplace depends on an honesty and clear, frank investigations into complaints, so that the organization faces its own truths. Where did it let people down? My gosh, Bob, my bully's always Bob. Bob is still here.
Right.
Well, you prop Bob up. How many times has Bob been found guilty, though he's been complained about 27 times? Zero. How many people have been either transferred out or left the company or unceremoniously terminated because of Bob? 27 out of 27.
Mm.
What are you not learning from that? Bob is creating a toxic work environment that a reasonable person cannot operate in. They lack both psychological safety to speak up, and they sure in the heck are at, as you say, the phrase is just what you said, psychosocial hazard risk. Every day they come to work, they are at risk of more psychological injury, stress-related diseases, as I say. We just go merrily along, and we let the turnover happen, the disproportionate turnover. You want to be a bullying consultant? Here's what you do. Show me the turnover rates across departments. And if one just jumps out, I say, there's where you're bullying.
Right.
Now, for billable hours, you need to drag that out, that analysis out. But I'm telling you, it's as simple as that.
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all Flourish DX Academy courses included within the Flourish DX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with Flourish DX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode.
So we are in the midst of what some are describing as either the great resignation, the great reassignment, the great reassessment, the whatever it is. This environment where, and again, I also hear that there's a labor shortage. Now, personally, I don't believe there's a labor shortage. I think there is a change in the mindset of people in terms of what they're going to accept at an employer. I think that's different. I think that many organizations who have set themselves up to hire the same people year after year after year, some of those people are retiring. Some of those people aren't like you. Some of those people have different skills than you, and you're not willing to make the change. But having said all that, talk a little bit about how this concept of, workplace bullying, abusive behavior may be affecting this whole great resignation period that we're in. Is there a connection, do you believe?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Tell me more.
What you just said is one of the few, if any, maybe the only good thing to come out of the COVID COVID sending us home and Zoomifying our world.
Right.
And I know that it upsets some people to be Zoomified, but hey, I get to see you and talk to you all the way in Georgia from Washington,
right,
on Zoom.
Right.
I've been doing my legal work, my expert witness work by Zoom. I've testified in trial by Zoom. I don't have to get on airplanes and fly yet. I love Zoom, but I'm an old coot. Right. So it's maybe I'm driven more by the convenience of it. Sure. I know in our 2021 national study where the bullying rate was 30%, whereas for remote workers it was 43%.
Really?
A little higher.
Wow.
And they use the remote work in group settings to berate and continue to humiliate people via Zoom. It's not the technology that's enabling it.
Right.
It's just displaced from in-person bullying. Now, what I see happening with these companies, incredibly, that the couple big tech companies in Silicon Valley that have insisted that their workers come back, insisted that they be there in person, is, to me, that company is revealing its need to control its workers more than valuing getting work done, especially in the tech world. Remote work is easily done that way. It's like they want to see it. Okay, I get this junk newsletter from SHRM. SHRM, this is the HR Trade Association.
Society for Human Resource Management.
Yeah.
Right.
And the latest one said, how are you going to maintain attendance in a remote world? And the little subtitle begins, a little description. Control must be maintained. How do we do this when we can't see them? Well, as we know, through the sending people home with a company laptop, they put a lot of the surveillance programs on them called bossware, where they're monitoring keystrokes and time away and being able to turn on microphones and cameras remotely in people's homes. What? You know what? You're renting my brain. You don't own my brain.
Right.
You're renting my brain.
Right.
And I need to turn it off, which takes me to a 2022 book, just came out. The author is Ellen Cobb, C-O-B-B, Ellen Pincus Cobb. Like you, an ally, a friend, colleague. She's an attorney, and we forgive her for that. The point is, she has written several books about bullying laws around the world. The 2022 book was, and you'll love this, she reviewed the psychosocial work environment laws around the world and contrasted it with the US. And of course, the US is the last to adopt anything. We haven't adopted any of it.
Right.
One of the things I was just hinting at was the idea of being left alone during non-work hours. And Europeans, I remember years ago, in the UK, they made even email contact by a supervisor to an employee off work hours a penalty for the supervisor.
Wow.
In America, it's like, you're hounded while you're on vacation. You were told on Friday afternoon, you need to have that project in on Monday, and you darn well better do it. That's the way we are. So not only we are not attending to any of these types of psychosocial laws. Right. I forget the name of that whole category. You know what it would be where they leave you alone. But it is basically time protection kind of a law. And every nation has one.
Except us.
Mexico and Canada have such advanced laws with respect to separating work from your life. We talk the language of work leisure, but then we let HR manage it. No. Right. Work means I don't want to hear anything from you, HR.
Right.
Ever. And I most certainly don't want it during my vacation time. So that book is a read for your audience, because you will be amazed the guidance. And in fact, she cited those major 6 categories of occupational hazards, health hazards, and we just do not consider psychosocial as one of them. Now, Great Resignation. Because people have had the Zoom life now for quite a bit of time. If you're come on, you got to be white collar to be Zoomified.
You do.
Grocery, all people deemed essential who have been shat upon because of that essentiality. In fact, the way we've actually acted is you're not essential because you got to be here in person and expose yourself to the disease, to the pandemic. You got to be there to bag the groceries. You got to be there to stock the shelves. You got to be there. Well, why don't we treat them like they're essential?
Right.
Well, to elevate their essentiality. But we don't. Right. But
more gaslighting.
I'm white collar.
Right.
I get to use Zoom, and I know it's a luxury, and I know I'm lucky. And I'm near the end of my work life, so let's get that straight. I like the comfort of it. But for everyone else who's been Zoomified, it has allowed them to ponder the meaning of their existence. Why do I, and this is funny, when I was younger, I used to do it. Why do I commute for an hour and a half each direction in LA to go to my lousy teaching job? Because I was young and stupid and I didn't know any different, and I needed the job and the health insurance.
Right.
is the simple answer. And I did do what I loved, but we tolerate all of that stuff without questioning. When it is stopped, only when it is stopped, the commute is stopped, do you ponder and say, look at all the extra time I have. Wow. And it also, it's increased domestic violence because now it has put a real focus on their family life. And maybe if things aren't as good as they thought they were, maybe they need to be working 80-hour weeks to sustain. I don't know. But I love the fact that it forces upon people who never had the time, quite frankly, to think about their job, to think about its meaning and its role in their lives. Now, that cannot be bad. Right. Now, I know there's already backlash against the Great Resignation, and maybe that's not true. Maybe it's the great something else. Right. But the numbers are clear that a lot of good people have no intention of going back to the office, and no, you can't make me.
That's right.
And I would scrutinize employers. They ought to be down on their knees saying, I want good help and I will not interfere with your freedom. You can Zoom all you need. I just want you to do the work. I'm readying your brain. If employers would just get past the need to control people's lives, they could understand that. So, what's strange? Here we are, you and I, fools that we are, lobbying for employers to care more about psychosocial work environments, the caring component, the quality of relationships among workers at work, during the work project, during work time. When in reality, employers have been dabbling in the field in the wrong way. They are over intrusive. They try and impose goofy things like wellness and values. And I love the phrase, what's it going to take to engage a worker? Engage safety.
Right. Yeah.
Quit tearing. They open their mouths and they get ripped to shreds.
Right.
That's disengagement.
That's
every program American employers launch have disengagement as their inadvertent outcome. And it's only inadvertent if they were too stupid enough to have seen it. But they're stupid because they haven't taken it into account. Now, what employers have ever done squat about bullying in my 25 years? Because we've created programs and products. I had been consulting since 1985. Now I'm giving away the age. I knew, and I'd been a management professor. I knew what it took for an organization to do what it needed to do. And so when we picked up bullying as our quote specialty, I thought, well, we'll just apply all of that to this. What a lesson I got in resistance. What a lesson I got in employer denial. Because just as bullying carries with it a heavy load of personal shame, I think it carries organizational shame too. Because at some level, they know what Bob is doing. Bob's been doing this nonsense and mistreating people for decades. They've paid out. Go talk to if you're a big corporation, go talk to your risk management department and see how much money they've paid out in settlements and severances just to get rid of the people who were threatened to expose Bob. Okay.
But
that doesn't mean they jump into it and say, let's do Bob. And here's why. Back to your explanation of why do we personalize everything? Why do we individualize everything instead of seeing in the social context? No, we're not Europeans. We do not have a collectivist culture of mutual commitment to one another's well-being long-term. That's not how Americans operate. That's for sure. I said that long before this huge partition in our society that's happened over the last decade or so, which I still bemoan, but I know that it's coming, it's just getting worse. But long story short, now I lost my train of thought. The tracks go in a lot of directions, and I obviously took a dead end. Go ahead.
No worry. So where I wanted to go, we've hopefully, if folks have been paying attention, they've heard kind of what the problem is and the pervasive nature of the problem here in this country. But there's some other work you've been doing at the Institute relative to the healthy workplace bill. And I want you to talk a little bit about where that concept comes from, what the idea, because eventually, I mean, it happened with virtually every law in this country. Somebody had to come up with the idea and continue to push it. And in some cases, it took decades. It took 100 years after we did an Emancipation Proclamation to have a Civil Rights Act. So this is going to take time. So talk a little bit about the Healthy Workplace Bill and the efforts that have gone into that concept over the years.
The starting point is, why would you need a law, employers? We can make a business case that bullies are too expensive to keep. You and I share, I think, the more important value-laden argument of employee health. Why would you voluntarily denigrate someone's health, destroy their health, just to allow the status quo to operate? There could be a moral case made, but don't even go there. I mean, that would be ridiculed so harshly. But I still make it occasionally. But here's the point. I find that employers don't do anything unless they're responding to a law. Their policies are designed to be compliant with an existing law. Do you think that employers would sit around in the C-suite and conjure up a sexual and anti-discrimination, anti-sexual harassment policy? You know, we're not treating our people well, and we're tough on minorities, and we're tough on women. I think we ought to protect them more. Hell no.
Right.
No.
Right.
The law compels compliance. Compliance is going to be codified by policies. Policies are only as good as the enforcement that follows.
Yes.
And if it's faithful enforcement, over time, you change the entire culture to be, instead of accepting of harassment, to be rejecting of harassment. Oh, you better not do that. I mean,
Right.
Just look at the self-suppression. If I do that, that looks bad. And then they're going to drag me into investigation. Then I'm going to be, and then Me Too came along and said, we're not only going to drag you in investigation, we're going to put you in the newspapers.
Wow.
And then they said, ooh, see, then organizations for a while were on board. Okay. So when we had bullying as our cause, defined it as our cause, in the very first year of our existence, a law professor from Suffolk University Law in Boston, David Yamada, contacted us, and he said, hey, I like what you guys are doing. Back then, we just had a toll-free number. Never do that. To listen to targets. We had started writing about bullying, the little that we knew. We were bringing a lot in from Britain and everything. And he said, you know, you guys are going to need a law. I said, need a law? I mean, that's like 20 years down the road of a social movement, isn't it? He said, it may take 20 years. You need to get a law started. And I'm writing a treatise for, he was back then, I think that was his final step in his full professorship. And he published in Georgetown Law Journal in the year 2000, the need for basically a bullying law. Without calling it bullying, the need for status blind harassment protection. What happens to a woman who is tormented by a woman? They're both technically members of protected status groups, woman on woman. But when you have two protected groups clashing, that tends to nullify the protection. Well, I mean, it takes a, go ahead.
Well, so what happens right now to a white male who is under 40?
Nothing. They have no protection.
No protection whatsoever. Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
But go ahead. Yes.
No, I want to do same for gender, same for race.
Yes.
Black on black.
Sure. Absolutely.
Is problematic.
Sure.
And that's why NAACP has always supported our push for a law. Anyway, now I'm not a lawyer, but since I deal so much with them, I feel some of the worst stuff is rubbed off on me. And that is if you're really a really sharp attorney, a true reading of the law, which reactionaries would read, is no, same race, same gender is not legal. No, you still can pursue it. Good luck. Good luck.
Yes.
How are you going to prove the animus is race when you're same race? Gender if you're same gender.
That's right.
It's virtually impossible. So let's get real, people.
Right.
And first of all, when it's same race, same gender, HR immediately dismisses it as not eligible for a complaint.
That's right.
According to their policies, which are driven by the state and federal non-discrimination law.
Sure.
So there's this huge, well, I actually have a slide that shows a pie. And in that pie is a slice that's 1/5, 20%. And the whole pie is bullying, status blind harassment that ignores it's just plain meddling and cruelty,
right,
as I defined it before.
Sure.
But in 1/5 of those cases, the targeted person is a member of a protected status class and the perpetrator is not. The harasser is not.
Sure.
So maybe, just maybe, you could make a complaint about discrimination or harassment and use the existing policies. However, you're still going to get retaliated against. So just know that.
Absolutely.
That's the way corporations work. The other 80% is bullying. So the need is not to, like we say, the need is to close a gap in the law. But the truth is that gap, that hole is enormous.
It's huge. Right.
People don't understand that non-discrimination laws provide very narrow protection for very, very few people. Okay. And then you got to go through and make the complaint and risk internally retaliation and termination, or worse, you got to go find an attorney and give him your house for a retainer and go through a lawsuit and all of that garbage. It's just an amazing owner's process. So, but what happens to all this? We got to cover that group. So what Yamada did, David Yamada did, is in his treatise he wrote in that article, is we have a current tort law. Tort laws are torts of injury when people are harmed.
Sure.
We have a tort law that really pertains to bullying. It's called intentional infliction of emotional distress.
Okay.
If that law were effective, you wouldn't need another law. You wouldn't need a new law. The problem is that one of the conditions of IIED is that the conduct must be outrageous, defined as outrageous. Now, you and I say, in the cases that with which you're familiar in bullying, it's all outrageous. What's that got to do with work? That only is about interpersonal. That's a campaign of interpersonal destruction.
Right.
Without merit, baseless, useless, serves no corporate purpose. No mission is accomplished from that. And most certainly no work is done better based on it. Okay. Having said that, the U.S. court's definition of outrageous conduct is the conduct must be beyond the bounds of civilized society. Whoa. That is essentially an unattainable standard. And so what Yamada did is he reviewed the pattern in IIED cases and how they failed because the judges would not grant that the conduct was outrageous. Now you take that same tort north of the border to Canada, they'll call it emotional distress or nervous shock. But their definition of outrageous conduct is what a reasonable person considers outrageous.
Right.
Now it's more humane. But not in America. Our standards are too high. So he said, given the gaps in civil rights laws, non-discrimination laws, coupled with the failure of IIED, you're going to need a law.
Right.
And that was his theoretical position in the year 2000.
Sure.
In the year 2001, we're talking now, we've become friends, and he says, and I said, well, how are we going to do a law? And he said, I guess I better write it. I said, yeah, I think you should draft it.
Probably should. Yeah.
And I
That's
dubbed it
publishing.
Healthy Workplace Bill,
Sure.
seeking to have a name that would make it hard to argue against.
Sure.
You know, like right-wing conservatives name something the antithesis of what they're actually trying to accomplish. In this case, I wanted a bill that would compel an employer to take reasonable steps to prevent and correct abusive conduct. We don't use the term workplace bullying in the text. Reasonable steps means policy and faithful enforcement. Policy enforcement, reasonable steps to prevent and correct. Policies prevent, correction is the enforcement and the accountability part, having consequences for offenders. Abusive conduct, defined as exactly how I define bullying for you. And long story short, he gave us the bill, and I didn't know nothing about birthing a bill. And I was guided in the California State House by a network of staffers to the lawmakers themselves. It's kind of hierarchical system. In the bigger states, lawmakers have staffs. And staffs do all the work. They do all the prioritization. They pick what the lawmaker should focus on, really.
That's right.
And this guy walked me through the reality, and I got a heavy dose of reality, and their network spread us around. Then Ruth and a teacher named Carrie, who had come to us early, and I went to the state capitol, and we visited lawmakers, and I grabbed the box of Kleenex, holding it, waiting for the tears to flow from hearing the two true stories they were about to hear. And we found a sponsor. And so the first state was California. From there, we kind of learned what's called the meet and greet things. We learned lobbying as citizens. And the big difference was we would meet with staff and be sitting on the little leather couch, but we'd see people with briefcases go directly in to meet the lawmaker. We knew there was cash in those briefcases or checks. Those were the lobbyists. They met lawmakers. We met staff. But later we did come to meet the lawmakers. And so we took those principles, and I threw up an invitation on the website then. Who wants to learn to get a law enacted in their state, introduced in their state? And so since then, 31 states have introduced the Healthy Workplace Bill. And no one has enacted it but Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico enacted it.
Absolutely. But
bless their heart.
But at the local level, as you know,
and do tell them.
As
Dr.
I shared,
Daniels, tell us a local level success story.
And I'll share with you. I made that attempt here in the state of Georgia. First to a state senator, then to a state representative. And, they put a lot of energy into it, but, you got to get through the process. And they were busy coming up with other bills on other things that I want to talk about at the moment. But I found a city council member here in the city that I live in who actually has the experience, multiple experiences of being a target of bullying herself. And that's always important, is to get someone who gets this, someone who has the lived experience. And she was able to sponsor what in my city is called the Healthy Workplace Ordinance. So it's a slimmed down version, but it is based on the Healthy Workplace Bill, and it passed in March of 2022, and it's law. Now, just like all these other places in the world, has it eliminated the problem? Absolutely not. But what it has done is created a framework to be able to start working on it. And it's the only local government that I'm aware of that's done that. And but I'm having conversation. I have a friend up in Michigan who's talking about going local. So and I think that might be another way to try to approach this, is if we can't get the feds or the states to do it, let's go to our city council folks. Let's go to our school boards and get this, because this is it's a close to the people issue anyway. So perhaps the protection should be closer to the people. So as we get,
at best, it breaks the silence.
Absolutely.
And that this whole phenomenon thrives on secrecy and shame and silence.
It does.
Let's talk about it. Can we just be honest? Can we
put it out there?
There you go.
Yeah, let's put it out there. So Wow. When I thought about bringing you on, I go like, I know we could talk about this. We could do, well,
Few
I
days.
watched, we could do a few days. I've shared with people that I don't know. What I know when I went through Workplace Bullying University, I go, how in the world can we get all this information squeezed into 3 days? And then when it was over, I got a binder worth of stuff that some of it I still haven't had the opportunity to read.
Now
So,
it's a 50 gig thumb drive. 50
yay.
gig thumb drive.
Yay,
Very good.
we are coming up in the world. But so
Yeah, I know.
talk a little bit about what's up next for the Institute, for Dr. Namie. What's going on, what's next, and then tell the folks what you're up to next.
Well, I think because of the impact of Zoomification and working from home and remote delivery of education, I'm all about education.
Sure.
I am still doing University Live, but now I have to do it via Zoom. I can't hug people and shake their hands and have lunches with you like we did and all the bonding. And I miss that. But I think I'm going to take it even one step back. I'm going to probably record University so it can be available to more people who don't have the weekends. It was brought up to me that by doing the program during the weekends, I'm cutting into Sabbath and church and stuff and weekends that people need for leisure. So I might make that program for professionals. Universities for training for professionals. I have also, and so since I've never recorded it, but I'm always changing it. But then I thought, well, I can always record the updates.
Sure.
So I think that's going to be a big project before the end of the year. This is our 25th anniversary. I'd like to lay that down before the next live one. Second, I've already recorded a shortened version of that for unions. I've been doing a lot for unions. I created a union education program, making it super cheap for them to buy so they can put it on their servers. So all members have the education. The reason for the education, and I don't overvalue it, trust me, I know what it takes. You got to still have people on the ground. So the education helps people recognize what's happening to them so they can talk to their stewards and reps more intelligently. Helps the stewards and reps to know that people are really hurting. And then I have a training for a team, a mental health first aid. What I got out of Ellen Cobb's book was this fascinating thing. For years and years and years, I've been training what I call expert teams to be crisis responders and then to provide the ongoing support. This inside a company is the group of dedicated anti-bullying advocates, so that if you have a bullying question or you think about bullying, you don't go to HR, you go to this team.
Sure.
And they're not only more expert, but they won't engage the organization.
Right.
And within a union, clearly you don't have to worry about the organization. It's the union. Then what happened is in Ellen Cobb's book, that's the Canadian version, and they call it mental health first aid teams.
Sure.
I love that.
It
isn't just that. I like crisis responding a little broader. But so we've been doing that. A lot of my work is invisible because I've been discovered as an expert witness in legal cases, and quite frankly, I'm getting swamped. As I get older, I don't know if it's forestalling dementia or what. It's really a memory test to do this work, but it's getting harder and harder. I'd like to do more things remotely and recorded so that I can ease into semi-retirement. Sure. See, unfortunately, the bullying visited our family at an uninvited time, as it always does.
Wow.
And it hit us in our 40s.
Sure.
And had it hit us in our 20s, I'd have another 20 years. I don't have another 20 to give to the cause. Sure. But I'm not done yet.
Right.
Ruth of all people wants to write another book, and I'm not sure what, but we have so much more to lay down. I keep expanding the interviews with targets to record so that people hear real targets. I keep expanding my tutorial section at the website. I don't put all of University down there, and that's not necessarily appropriate. But I want people to know for free what the heck's happening to them and do not blame themselves. You had mentioned before, we had the discussion, why the focus on the individual and the ignoring of the environment? Well, the focusing on the individual when you are the individual targeted leads to self-blame. You blame yourself.
Right.
So we need to teach targets, see the environment.
Right.
The bully, the perpetrator,
Right.
is out there.
Right.
They are an external stressor.
Right.
And so that work doesn't seem to end. We
Right.
don't talk to folks on the phone anymore. I have licensed counselors that do the coaching and the rest,
Sure.
and people can access them through the website.
Sure.
I'm trying to leave as a legacy, almost a standalone self-help center. The other new thing that we just started because of Zoom and the rest
Sure.
is we created Facebook. I've never been on Facebook. And now we've seen the toxicity of social media and how the ugliness seems to be amplified. It's drawn to that because of their algorithms. So we created a community of bully targets, a place to go with complete psychological safety.
Oh, okay.
It's called Safe Harbor.
Okay.
And it's free. And the point is, it's targets talking to and helping targets and not compounding their trauma. We have moderator to watch for those kinds of things, but it's approaching, I don't know, 800 people or so.
Wow.
And the whole point is it's the antithesis it's our answer to Facebook.
Sure.
And they can get there through the front page of the WBI website, workplacebullying.org. If you go there and scroll around, you'll see everything.
Right on.
I got a lot of stuff going on there. I've
Right.
put it all in one place. You have to be patient. You have to be wanting to be a student. But if you're bullied and you're wondering what the hell's happening to you, please go there.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for taking time to chat with me. Like I said, I'm just really honored. As I've shared with people, I don't know if I want to get into the story. It might go too long, but when I was working with the International Association of Fire Chiefs on their bullying and harassment task group, we didn't have any idea that there was an institute or anything, and we stumbled across it.
That's always the verb, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Isn't it, David? Always the verb stumble.
Yeah, I just stumped and I couldn't believe. So I called the phone number. You picked up the phone, and I've always been amazed that you're so open and so gracious to be able to help that effort, and it's turned into all kinds of things. And I also want to believe that I now have a friend for life, and also if I need some help, I know where to get it. So I appreciate the work that you and Ruth are doing. And we expect to see a lot more from the Institute and from you. And I'm sure we're going to have you back on soon because there's a lot to talk about.
Hey, right back at you, the same respect and love. Right
on. So that's it. That's it for this episode of Psych Health and Safety USA. Again, I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I will see you next time when we talk more about healthy and safe workplaces here in the USA.
Tune in each Friday for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to david@id2-solutions.com or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.